Welcome to JTB's Courtroom in the Classroom. Today, we'll be participating in the American Bar Association's Law Day 2020. This year's theme is Your Vote, Your Voice, Our Democracy, the 19th Amendment at 100. It has been 100 years since the enactment of the 19th Amendment, which guaranteed that the right of citizens to vote would not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on the account of sex. American women fought for and won the right to vote through their voice and action. This session will discuss the impact of the 19th Amendment and how changes to the right to vote creates progress in politics. Consider the implications that the 19th Amendment had on our society. Voting ensures women's reproductive and economic progress. The 19th Amendment helped millions of women move closer to equality in all aspects of American life. Women advocated for job opportunities, fairer wages, education, sex education, and birth control. Now consider the 19th Amendment's impact on current elections, such as the 2020 presidential election, which will mark the centennial of women's right to vote. The following are excerpts of a column from the Courier. The passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920 gave women the right to vote, yet they remained relatively quiet at the polls for decades. But in every presidential election since 1980, women have cast between 4 million to 7 million more votes than men. According to the Power Research Center, women have turned out at higher rates for midterm elections dating back to 1998. In 2018, 55% of women who were eligible to vote cast ballots, while only 51.8% of eligible men did the same. Women don't take anything for granted, including the right to vote. The lyrics of Helen Reddy's 1972 song, I Am Woman, Hear Me Roar, in numbers too big to ignore come to mind, in that women may be the most powerful force for political change. Changing voting rights for women clearly has had major implications for women's rights and has changed the trajectory of American history. Now consider other voter regulations, such as the age limit of voting. What would happen if the voting age was lowered to 16? How would that change elections in American history? From the 1990s to the present, elected officials in several U.S. states have made unsuccessful attempts to lower the voting age to 16, and sometimes even younger. Student activism in the wake of February 2018 shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, has brought new life to the debate over letting younger people vote. Currently, Berkeley, California, and a handful of cities in Maryland allow 16-year-olds to participate in local elections. Internationally, about 20 countries allow citizens to vote at age 16, sometimes with conditions such as being employed or married. A constitutional amendment to lowering the voting age to 16 would require approval from two-thirds of both houses of Congress and three-fourths of the state legislators. Alternatively, state legislators could pass laws allowing younger people to vote in their states. The DC City Council had considered legislation that would allow 16 and 17-year-olds in the nation's capital to vote in all elections, including the 2020 presidential election, but they tabled the bill indefinitely after losing support from council members. Until the 1970s, the voting age in America was 21. A debate over lowering it to 18 began during World War II, when President Franklin D. Roosevelt decreased the military draft age to 18. President Eisenhower called for citizens ages 18 to 21 to be included in the political progress in his 1954 State of the Union address. But lawmakers didn't take action until marches and demonstrations drew attention to the fact that young people who were being drafted to fight in Vietnam didn't have the ability to vote in most states. Congress proposed the 26th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution in 1971, which stated The right of citizens of the United States who are 18 years of age or older to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of age. The ratification process, which required approval from 38 states, was completed in around 3 months, the shortest amount of time of any amendment in U.S. history. Let's look at the pros and cons of lowering the voting age to 16. Pro 1. 16-year-olds are just as knowledgeable about civics and have the same ability to make good voting choices as older voters. A study in the Annals of American Academy of Political and Social Science found that, on measures of civic knowledge, political skills, political efficiency, and tolerance, 16-year-olds on average are obtaining scores similar to those of adults. Adolescents in this age range are developmentally ready to vote. Scientists believe that cold cognition skills, those used to make the kind of informed, well thought out choices needed in voting, are solidly established in 16-year-olds. Austria lowered the voting age to 16 in 2007. According to Marcus Wagner, social science professor at the University of Vienna, studies of subsequent elections show that the quality of these younger citizens' choices is similar to that of older voters. So they do cast votes in ways that enable their interests to be represented equally. Con 1. Kids under the age of 18 aren't mature enough to participate in elections. Experts say that 16 and 17-year-olds demonstrate lower interest in politics, have less political knowledge, and lack the experience needed to participate in elections. Scientists Tad Win Chan and Matthew Clayton say that 16 and 17-year-olds wouldn't be competent voters because research in neuroscience suggests that the brain, specifically the prefrontal cortex, is still undergoing major reconstruction and development during the teenage years, and added that the prefrontal cortex is what enables us to weigh dilemmas, balance trade offs, and in short, make reasonable decisions in politics. People under 18 are subject to different labor, contract, and criminal responsibility laws and aren't allowed to join the military without parental consent or serve on a jury. Most are still living at home and would be influenced by the voting choices of their parents. Pro 2. Lowering the voting age to 16 increases voter turnout and develops lifelong voting habits. The United States has one of the lowest voter turnout rates among developed countries. A person who votes in one election has a 13% greater probability of voting in future elections. Researchers say that people who participate in elections when they first reach voting age are likely to develop the habit of voting, and those who don't are more likely to remain non voters. 16-year-olds are learning about the government and civics in high school, and the structured environment would lead to higher turnout among 16 and 17-year-olds, as teachers and parents help them overcome typical obstacles for first-time voters, such as the registration process and finding their polling place. Involving young people in voting can have a trickle-up effect that mobilizes their parents and other adults in their households to vote. Turnout among 16 and 17-year-olds in Tacoma Park, Maryland, the first U.S. municipality to lower the voting age for local elections, was double that of eligible voters 18 and older. Con 2. The 18 to 29 age group has extremely low voter turnout numbers, suggesting that people aren't ready to vote until later in life. Only 12.5% of 18-year-olds participated in the 2014 midterm election, compared to the 42% of the general population. According to the United States Elections Projections Analysis of the U.S. Census Bureau data, just 16% of eligible voters ages 18 to 29 voted in the 2014 election, compared to 30% of ages 30 to 44, 43% for 45 to 59-year-olds, and 55% for age 60 and up. David Davenport, research fellow at the Hoover Institute, said, "My concern is if 16-year-olds were allowed to vote on any kind of broad-scale issue, what we'd actually be doing is bringing the least politically informed, the least politically experienced, and the least mature in terms of making long-term judgments and trade-offs directly into and potentially affecting our voter turnout and results. Pro 3. At age 16, people should have a voice in the laws that affect their lives and a stake in the future of their country. A U.S. Senate report cited student activism and protests are reasons for lowering the voting age to 18 in the 1970s during the Vietnam War. We must channel these energies in our political system and give young people the real opportunity to influence our society in a peaceful and constructive manner. Students today live under threats to their futures, such as school shootings and climate change, and they deserve to have influence over their elected officials beyond the protests they've organized. Sophie Whitney, a survivor of the school shooting in Parkland, Florida, says, if 16-year-old students are old enough to be affected by the laws and realize that there is a problem, then they should have the power to help change it. Con 3. The vast majority of Americans of all ages and political views agree that 16-year-olds should not be given the right to vote. A 2018 poll from The Atlantic and the Public Religion Research Institute found that 81% of Americans oppose lowering the voting age to 16. Only 19% of young people support the idea, and just 9% of seniors. A different survey found 8% support for lowering the voting age to 16. 45% want to keep it at 18, and 46% would like to raise it back to the age of 21. A Twitter poll by WJLA, an ABC News affiliate in Washington, D.C., found just 18% support for proposed bill to lower the voting age to 16 in the District of Columbia, compared to the 77% against it. What was the most convincing or persuasive evidence for you, and what do you think? Just like the 19th Amendment helped influence policy in the last 100 years, how do you think Generation Z would influence America and the election in 2020? Thank you for joining JTB's participation in the ABA's Law Day.